Hey everybody, this is GGB. We're going to talk about what happened yesterday, what went down in the Big Ten, ACC, Big East, Big 12, and SEC. We're going to go over the games today that include ACC, SEC, and Big East basketball play. I'm really excited. I hope you guys are too. Let's get into this thing. I didn't hit my upset, but I'm fine with that. In the Big Ten, we had one of the biggest upsets of the year. We had Michigan State upset Illinois. Now, if you're a Minnesota fan, you really are disappointed by this outcome. Minnesota now sits, if the season were to end today, they would have to play Nebraska day one in the Big Ten tournament. And to be honest, I do not want to play Nebraska with the way Teddy Allen's playing. Absolute beast out there. That's really all that happened. Michigan State moved up a spot. Now, we'll see what happens today. There's interesting stuff going on in the Big Ten. No ranked games, but I'll talk about it for a little bit. If Rutgers is to win this game, they'll pass Maryland. And if Indiana is to win this game, they'll pass Rutgers and Maryland. So whoever wins this game, Maryland's going down a spot regardless. So if you're a Maryland fan, you're disappointed. But Rutgers and Indiana both get a chance to pick up quality wins for the tournament. Now you look at the ACC. Virginia Tech lost last night to Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech moved past Syracuse, not quite past Clemson just yet. NC State was sitting with a chance to, get a pretty good record at 7-8 going. And I'm excited. I feel lucky for the Wolfpack. I think they're doing well. I think they're playing well enough. It's going to be interesting. There's a lot of teams that are questionable down the stretch. I think Virginia, Florida State, and Virginia Tech basically have already punched their tickets to the playoffs. Virginia Tech only has a couple games left down the stretch. Only 3 left. So the worst they can do is lose those 3 and have a 14-8 record. But I don't see that happening either. I think Virginia Tech's going to get in regardless. So is Virginia and Florida State. Now, the big question starts at Louisville. Now, Louisville, I feel like, is a very high chance of getting in. I think they'll make it in. UNC, Duke, Clemson, Georgia Tech, Syracuse, they're all question marks in my mind. They're all very much question marks. They could all make – these teams are all good. I don't think they'll all make it. I think a lot of it depends on how they do in the ACC tournament. I think Duke's name carries a lot of weight, but again, they have a worse record than Clemson, so take that with a grain of salt. Same with UNC, so I think you have to let in Clemson and UNC before you let in Duke just quite yet. And I'm going to be honest, Syracuse has a pretty good record. They don't have good wins, but they do have a pretty good record. But let's move on to the Big East. Nothing huge happened here since Villanova was able to outlast St. John's. Xavier picked up a win, moving them past St. John's. They beat Butler on Sunday. Never mind. But just the St. John's loss put Xavier ahead of them. The St. John's moved down a peg. Now, Providence has a chance today to move to 8-9 when they play Xavier, and they can be right at the same in-conference record as St. John's, and they do have a little bit of time left. They still have two more games after today against St. John's again and Villanova. So they do have a chance moving forward to take St. John's spot and possibly Xavier's spot if you're really aiming high. Now, Big 12, stuff changed a lot. Oklahoma fell from 2nd place to 4th place today. We had West Virginia rise from 4th place to 2nd place. Kansas lost to Texas, which was my upset of the day. I'm not that disappointed, though, because my Longhorns won. Not to mention Kansas State pulled off possibly the upset of the year today when they beat Oklahoma. At least the Big 12 upset of the year. Kansas State now moves to 3-13. I have one thing to say about Kansas State. This is not the same Kansas State team that lost to Fort Hays State, the Division II team. They've gotten better. They've gotten significantly better. And I know, there's a lot of good teams in the Big 12. Obviously, I'm going to say if I'm Baylor, I obviously don't want to play West Virginia, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, Oklahoma State, Texas Tech. They're all tough teams. But I have to say, Kansas State's also a tough out at this point, the way they're playing basketball. I'm going to see how they do against West Virginia. I have a little bit of skepticism. If they beat West Virginia, I'll be all in on this Wildcat bandwagon. It's going to be interesting. I think they're playing really well. Now, if they win the next few games, they have a 5-13 record. If TCU loses the next few, they have a 4. Actually, they could lose all of them down the stretch, 4-12. So, technically speaking, as long as Kansas State wins out, which I mean, the West Virginia game is going to be tough, but they do have an Iowa State game coming up. Say they win out, TCU loses out, which is possible if you look at their schedule. They have some tough games coming up. They have to play. Well, the Iowa State one isn't that tough, but you have to play Texas Tech, West Virginia, in Texas. That's a tough schedule moving forward. So, I could see Kansas State moving past TCU. I'm just saying. So, I don't know. I think it's going to be interesting. It's not a huge difference because if you're that seed, you're going to be playing the seed below it regardless. Like, if you are Kansas State and you win out and TCU loses out, you're still playing TCU, but you're just the higher seed. I don't know what you're going to get out of exactly, but I got to say, this Kansas State team is impressing me. Now you go to the SEC. Some stuff happened last night in the SEC. You obviously had the Ole Miss upset of Missouri. That very much helped Ole Miss. Now if you're an Ole Miss fan, you're going to be a huge fan of Vanderbilt basketball tonight. But I am impressed by Georgia. Georgia pulled off a huge win last night against LSU. That's weird. This is a weird division. I got to say, a weird conference. Everyone expected Tennessee and Missouri to be the top teams. Alabama wasn't a top 25 team coming into the year. I just like to remind everyone that. They're the only home run team for me, in my opinion. Arkansas is a decent team, but I could see a lot of these teams missing the tournament below that. LSU is they're just too inconsistent. You have Florida below that. Florida won against Auburn last night, but did they have a quality win on the year? I don't think so. You have Tennessee. Team that loses to bad teams. They lost to Kentucky last weekend. Again, I don't think they should be a top 25 team. And you have Ole Miss. Ole Miss is a decent team, and I'd really like to see how they keep moving forward with this win over Missouri. I still think they have a decent chance of moving forward. They still have a Vanderbilt and Kentucky game left. They should win those. I could see Ole Miss easily finishing with a 9-7 record. The way LSU played against Georgia, they could finish with. No, I don't see them losing against Vanderbilt, but they could finish with a 10-6 record. Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. I think it's going to be very interesting down the stretch, how these teams do. But that's all I have to say. Ole Miss passed Missouri. Missouri is now in a tough predicament, to be sure. If Kentucky wins one night, they're going to pass them. That's really all that happened last night. LSU was upset. Florida was able to stave off Auburn. That's really all that happened. But let's get into the games that are today. No ranked Big Ten basketball, so we're going to get rid of that tab. Let's start in the ACC. We have two games. At 5:30, we have NC State traveling to number 15, Virginia, with Virginia being favored by 11.5 points. And at 7:03, we have number 11, Florida State, traveling to Miami, with Florida State being favored by 12 points. Now, let's look at this stuff. Now, if Virginia was to win this basketball game, Florida State was to lose, obviously Virginia would take the first place spot in the ACC. Now, Florida State with a win keeps control of the ACC. Virginia with a win would stay in second place. But now, if you look at it, what happens to the teams below with wins and losses? Because really nothing's going to happen. If Virginia was to lose, they'd stay at 11-4. Florida State, the worst thing that can happen to them is drop to second place in the ACC. Then, if you look at a team like NC State, they can't move up with a win, but they can move down. It would hurt them to lose this basketball game because you just look at the schedule. It would hurt. I gotta say, if you're a Wolfpack fan, you kind of want to win this game because otherwise, you don't have a great schedule down the stretch. NC State. Well, you have a decent schedule down the stretch, is what I'm trying to say. You still have to play Virginia Tech, although that seems like a very beatable basketball team. Virginia win would be very nice, because if you could win out down the stretch, you could have a 10-8 record. You could have a 14-9 record. That might be enough to get you in if you pull off some pretty huge ACC upsets in the tournament. But with a win and a loss, they're not moving regardless, because Notre Dame's not playing today. Now, yeah, no, they're not moving. I was looking to see if Pitt played today, because if Pitt would win and NC State would lose, Pitt would pass them, but Pitt's not playing today, so, whoop-de-doo. NC State with a win is also not going to move anywhere. They would have a 7-8 record, still not better than Syracuse's 7-6 in conference record. So NC State's not moving today regardless, but it would get you a little bit closer to Syracuse, which is what you want. Now, if you're looking at it moving forward, you have also Miami. Miami really wants this win against Florida State, because if you pick up the win, you have a 4-12 record. That's better than a 3-11 record, so you can pass Wake Forest with a win. That's really all you want if you're ACC. If you're Miami right now, don't want to strike too high. You can't pass Pitt, but you can pass Wake Forest, and that's really what you want here. That would be the huge benefit of a Miami upset if you're Miami. Now, if you're a Virginia Tech fan, you just hope everyone loses today to bump them down a notch so you can still come back and win this division, win this conference. Let's move on to the SEC. We have 2 games going on today that are ranked. We have number 25, Tennessee, traveling to Vanderbilt at 8 o'clock on the SEC Network, with Tennessee being favored by 7 points. And we have number 6 at Alabama, traveling to number 20, Arkansas, on ESPN2. Now, if you look at that, Alabama is just not losing this conference. I don't know what to say. If they lose the next 3 games, then maybe. That's still a maybe. They'd have a 13-4 record. Yeah, Arkansas only has 3 games left, so the best they can have is a 12-4 record. So yeah, no, Alabama has clinched the division. Clinched it. That's it. I mean, you can't. Alabama's not losing this division regardless of what happens today. This is basically for seeding. It's just like in the Big 12. Like, Baylor's not losing the Big 12. And that's really it. That's the only other comparison I could think of, because Michigan still can lose the Big 10, and USC can still lose the Pac-12, and, there's all this stuff. A lot of stuff that can happen. But if you're just looking at it from a perspective, Arkansas, with a win, would retain still second place in the SEC, and would be a game ahead of a team like LSU, which is good. You don't want to be at the same record as LSU. You want to be a game ahead of LSU. Now, if you lose today, you're still going to have second place, but you're going to have second place just off the tiebreaker of a home record. You'd have a 17-6 record, while he had a 14-7 record, just an overall worse record. But Arkansas would stay there. I think Arkansas has been a very pleasant surprise this year in the SEC, in my opinion. Alabama and Arkansas have both been very pleasant surprises to see them both do well. Obviously, you'd want the Arkansas to win this one if you're an Arkansas fan. That's really all that's going to affect anything. Now, if you're an Ole Miss fan, you're just sitting there going, because if Tennessee loses this game, it knocks them down to the same conference record as you. Now, you don't get the tiebreaker because they have a 15-7 record, you have a 13-9 record, right? But that's it. If you're an Ole Miss fan, you're very close to Tennessee, and passing Tennessee would be huge for Ole Miss, especially you could get to 5th place in the SEC. That's pretty sweet. You pulled off a huge upset against Missouri. I think this is a very exciting game. Now, Vanderbilt, if you're a Texas A&M fan, you don't want Vanderbilt to win, because if they win, then they're in second to last place instead of last place. Now, suddenly Texas A&M, is in last place, and that's not ideal if you're a Texas A&M fan. So, obviously, you're rooting for Tennessee in this one. But if Vandy pulls off the upset, Ole Miss fans are going to be so happy. The Rebels are going to be so happy. Now you move on to the last game of the day. We have at 8 o'clock the Big East, DePaul traveling to number 13, Creighton. Now, if you are a Villanova fan, obviously you don't want Creighton to win this game, because Creighton is legitimately right on the heels of Villanova, and Villanova with a loss probably is going to lose the division to the conference to Creighton, and Creighton still holds their fate in their hands when they play number 8 Villanova on March 3rd. So, obviously, if you are a Villanova fan, you are a huge supporter of DePaul here. Now, DePaul is just so far out, it really does not matter. They are not going to not be in last place, because the best they can do is win their last 3 games and have a 5-10 record. That is the best they can do. Now, they might be able to pass Butler or Marquette if they were to lose out, just because of the percentages, because they would have a 6-14 record, or they would only have a 5-10 record, so 5-10 record might be better. It's just, DePaul would have to win out, and some of these games for the last bit is tough for DePaul. For instance, the number 13 Marquette game. Georgetown's a tough out, so is Marquette, so it's going to be interesting. I don't think DePaul can really move up from that last place, but, I mean, they have to win today to keep their hopes alive. So, Creighton's not moving down with a loss. So the best thing, really nothing's going to change in the Big East today. I'll say that. At least with the ranked teams. Stuff could happen with the unranked teams. But nothing's going to change with the ranked teams. Creighton's not taking first place in the Big East, and they're not falling to third place today in the Big East. And then you look at DePaul, they're not moving up to second to last place. They're going to be in last place regardless of a win today or not. So that's really where we're sitting in the Big East. So, who does GGB think is going to pull off the upset of the day? And I have to lean towards Arkansas. I've seen so many good things out of the Razorbacks. They've played so well recently. And I understand, number 6 Alabama played very well. But then the problem is, if you look at number 6 Alabama, they played very poorly against Vanderbilt. I understand you can have an off day. But sometimes you get into a little bit of funk. I'm going to bet that Alabama started into a funk where Arkansas is not in a funk. They've played extremely well recently. I think the Razorbacks have a huge chance of pulling off this upset. Hey everybody, this is GGB saying adios amigos and go Razorbacks.